I'd like to call to order the March 25th, 2019 meeting of the Highland Park Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting, setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Linda, can we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Here.
Ms. Cimarosti?
Here.
Ms. Coleman? Ms. Gowan? Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Magaziner?
Here.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Here.
Mr. Roslevich? Mr. Whiten? Sorry.
Be it resolved, pursuant to the Sunshine Act, NJSA 10-4-12 and 13, the Highland Park Board of Education will now meet in closed session to discuss discipline and HIB matters. These exemptions are permitted to be discussed in closed session in accordance with NJSA 10-4-13. Information regarding the board's closed session discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Can I get a motion to recess to closed session?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Session?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, if we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Flags right over there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Linda, we don't have any communications on the agenda. Is there anything since we put the agenda out?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And then number 8 on the agenda, we have corrections to the minutes from the January 28th, 2019 meeting. Number 9, then we also have the approval of the minutes from the regular public and executive session meetings from February 25th, 2019. Would somebody like to move items 8 and 9?
Yes, I would like to move items 8 and 9.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on either of those 2 items? No. Seeing none. Linda, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Cimarosti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Abstain.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Yes.
Okay, student representative report. We have a singular student this evening.
Yes, I wasn't able to make it today. All right. So for Bartle, or Irving, there's not much news from Irving since last week. For Bartle, Bartle's having an awards assembly and a book club meeting on the 27th. For the middle school had its Open Wash, Open Hearts Thursdays last week. And tomorrow there will be a half day for parent-teacher conferences. For the high school, parent-teacher conferences were last week. The Model Congress team is preparing for Rutgers Model Congress conference last week, and we wish them the best of luck. We're in the process of being recertified for bronze certification for Sustainable Jersey for the school district. Global citizenship students have finished their research and are preparing for their final project. We have a special request to submit a survey to the high school student body from members of Teen PEP. They need the permission of the board as well as certain other processes before going ahead with the survey, which I have all shared with you. Teen PEP stands for Teen Prevention Education Program. This is a group comprised of juniors and seniors that have been educated in leadership and sexuality issues and help educate other underclassmen. Playing a major role in the education of the freshmen about important sex-related topics, Teen PEP believes it would be in the best interest of not only the school, but more importantly to the students by granting them access to basic contraception. According to Planned Parenthood, among teen females aged 15 to 19, 42% reported being sexually active, and among teen males, this was 44%. Understanding this statistic, it's important to encourage and support condom use among young teens because it is designed to aid in preventing HIV and AIDS, STDs, and unwanted pregnancy. Teen Pep is looking for funding for this program, which would be discreetly distributing condoms and other forms of contraception in the nurse's office.
Awesome. So you're going to look into what we can do to distribute that survey? Yep. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? It said there's already been responses, so does that mean it's already been partly administered, or like when you go to, I just want to ensure, like, is this a survey that's already been completed or a survey that's?
No, this hasn't been completed. We weren't aware that we needed to seek parent approval before we administered the survey.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
So it's currently closed before we
Got it.
going to go ahead with it again.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Move on to Dr. Taylor's report.
I'm very excited to see familiar faces, including one of our own teachers, middle school teachers, who happens to also have a family here in town. I'd like to introduce Mr. Benjamin, who will go to the podium and speak a few words about a special person who's here to be honored.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Taylor, guests, and members of the Highland Park community who are watching this meeting remotely. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here tonight on this special occasion to continue with a great tradition the board has established, which is to continuously acknowledge students of excellence and reward such students with the distinction of being recognized as the Board of Education Student of the Month. Francis of Assisi said, "Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible." Each day we live our lives doing what's necessary, and if time permits, and we have a little bit more energy in our day, we sometimes do what's possible. When and where do we learn to do the impossible? I'd say that learning to do the impossible starts in our youth. In our youth, we are fearless, we stretch our limits and imagination, and never hesitate to ask ourselves and others, why or why not? Our Bartle community has and continues to flourish, not just because we have an extremely dedicated, creative, and instructionally talented staff, but also because of our incredible student body. Since coming to Bartle nearly 5 years ago, I have been truly blessed to meet some amazing and inspiring students who do near impossible things. With the over 50 events, initiatives, programs, and activities we provide students and families throughout the school year, it's hard to imagine that even a fraction of these events, initiatives, programs, and activities are engaged with fidelity, but we do it. We are able to accomplish the impossible through dedicated, creative, and instructionally talented staff and amazing and inspiring student leaders. Tonight, I'm happy and I'm proud to be here acknowledging Bartle's Board of Education Student of the Month Award. I'm proud to look into the eyes of some pretty dedicated, caring, and inspiring parents and say, your child is amazing and truly inspiring. She is who she is because of you. On occasion, I've actually had the opportunity to speak to Dan and talk to Dan just about parenting in general as a new parent myself and as a soon-to-be another one on the way. And he's given some really sound advice, and I'm very appreciative of it. And by the looks of it, how you're raising your children, you know, I'm going to take a lot of the advice you've given over the years. So thank you for that. I met our Board of Education Student of the Month when she arrived as a second grader, and I can tell you, it is not a surprise that she has turned out to be the student leader she is today, now as a fifth grader. Our Board of Education Student of the Month personifies many leadership qualities many would find rare in many of our youth today. Our Board of Education Student of the Month is like all other students, and she loves to laugh and have fun with her friends. However, she goes a step further when engaging peers and teachers. She is honest, has integrity, confident, inspires others, has commitment and passion, is a good communicator, makes great decisions, is accountable, creative, and most importantly, shows empathy. In addition to being a great student and student leader, our Student of the Month is an integral member of our Bartle family and community. She volunteers her broadcasting skills for our morning BTV announcements. She volunteers countless hours to assist our media specialists in organizing the library. She volunteers and assists with cleaning up after an epic event. She has even baked food to assist in our fundraising efforts for class trips and so many other noteworthy causes. Such a true inspiration. And wait until you see her smile, it lights up the room. I cannot imagine a more worthy recipient of our Bartle Board of Education Student of the Month Award than this individual. Please welcome me in acknowledging and congratulating Jahan Mladnick on being a great student and human being and receiving the Highland Park Board of Education Student of the Month Award. Again, thank you, board members, and congratulations, Jahan. Come on up here.
Yep, I'm gonna have to move. I'll just go This is so sensory uncomfortable.
So I'm going to shift gears. I'd like to speak for about 15 minutes about a workshop I had a chance to attend in Atlanta. Give me 1 second. I'm going to set up my computer. Do my thing.
Ann and Rob, you guys could come over here to this corner, and you still have microphones if you want.
Perfect. So I had to thank the board and the community directly for supporting my participation in a wonderful conference called the REACH Conference that was held in Atlanta. REACH, by the way, stands for this. The REACH organization is solely purposed to bring together well-known speakers and researchers who focus on equity, educational equity. So my intent in going down to Atlanta was to focus specifically on the topics that we have been addressing through our strategic plan, including discipline equity, how to work with students in poverty, our lower socioeconomic student population, how to, hey John, can we turn the volume down a little bit? I'm getting some feedback. Sorry. Thanks. And how to help the students who are disenfranchised have a greater voice. So I'd like to spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes talking about what I learned and what I'll be turnkey to the leadership team. Thank you. So the conference took place for 2 days back in February, a little over a month ago. The first keynote speaker was a real kick poet Nikki Giovanni, who some of us know. If you don't, I definitely would look for her work. She was a smash, a good way to warm everybody up. Participants of the conference were from all over the country, mostly counselors, some teachers, a lot of leaders, principals, one or two superintendents. I was one of the very few superintendents who were there, and then some higher education folks. One of the first workshops I attended was facilitated by the author of this work, Integrating Camelot. The woman on the right, actually a Teachers College grad, she and I had classes together, it turns out, when I was doing my doctoral work at Teachers College, was a city worker for the New York City school system, and talked about the fight to integrate her mostly black student school situated in one of the worst parts of the Bronx. And so what we did is we dissected her book, at least a piece of it, and looked at it as a case study, and then examined some of the keys to her success, to finally integrating the faculty first, and then the students little by little. I mean, as we all know right now, New York City is dealing with a host of issues regarding integration, particularly with its specialized schools like Stuyvesant and Brooklyn Tech. I'm going to share some of my takeaways with you in a couple of minutes. One of the things that I really came away thinking mostly about when I stepped out of that workshop was the need for us to be giving people in our schools, whether they're adults, parents, guardians, caretakers of our kids, or kids themselves, especially in the upper grades, a voice. And by voice, I'm not talking about a seat at the table. Yes, that helps. I'm actually talking about an opportunity to be expressive, to know that they have a place where they could go comfortably, safely, and talk about their needs. I love the phrase that I took away from the author's workshop, that we've got to focus on figuring out how to transform people's view about the importance of giving voice. There are people working in our school district, including me to a certain extent, who don't realize just how important it is to focusing on giving other people voice. Another workshop I attended, which reflected some of the stuff we're already doing, had to do with implicit bias. The gentleman on the right works with the National Training Institute on Race and Equity, and took us through a whole 2-day series of workshops regarding implicit bias. Here's some interesting takeaways. He emphasized the point that so much of what we do is done subconsciously. We don't even realize how we may treat other people, how we might make decisions, how we interact with people like kids on a level that we just don't consciously, of which we're not consciously aware. If anything, this validated some of what we're starting to do, or what we started to do and we're continuing to do in our professional learning communities, and that is to try to uncover our implicit biases and then realize how they're impacting our relationships, how they're leading to microaggressions in some cases. And then there's a gentleman who I am desperate to bring to Highland Park, whose name is Chris Emden. Chris is a Teachers College professor, about 45 minutes from here, an author. One of the books that I've read of his that is probably one of the more popular is For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, Y'all. And I'll explain how that all plays into what he has to say. It's not so much, by the way, that what he says in his book and what he said to us in his keynote was brand new. It was just his delivery. I'm working with my partners at Rutgers University, including Ben Justice, Nora Highland, who's the head of the teaching certification programs, to see if we can come together as a triad with our district, Rutgers, 2 departments, to try to fund his appearance in September. So that's my head right now. I'd love to have him help rile up our troops. I love the focus of his thinking. Chris is all about getting past this notion that achievement's only academic. That, you have to see achievement in, and I know I'm speaking to the choir somewhat with our Board of Education, that achievement is strictly by the numbers on a proficiency assessment. If I could somehow get the State Board of Education to realize this and scrap its graduation assessment plans, even if it means getting Chris Enton down to Trenton, I would. he talks about how we've just got to get kids to think about what it feels like to be excellent, to be so strong academically, socially, and emotionally. Fortunately, there's no clear measure of that. I mean, we can't, we can anecdotally determine if a kid's feeling excellent, but we really can't measure it, which is probably why policymakers have such a hard time with what Chris is trying to say. But just imagine if we could eschew the notion that kids only are academically excellent if we can measure that excellence. What about if we just got them to feel excellent? And he talked a lot about doing these things to get them to feel excellent, to give them affirmation, especially our disenfranchised kids, our students of color, our Hispanic students, not all, but many, our students in low socioeconomic stratas. These are the kids who we have to give a little extra to so they feel affirmed, that they are already good and that we can make them feel excellent if we just keep supporting them. That's why I'm so bent on doing whatever we can to focus on our social emotional wellness initiatives. We have a long way to go in the big picture arena, especially in the area of discipline. But what if we just looked at how we can affirm what our kids are about while they're in the classroom? I'm hoping my audio picks this up. Somebody asked a question that I was going to ask Chris. The question was, what do you do with the educator, the adult in the school who doesn't get that, who doesn't realize that the way he or she thinks subconsciously might be negatively impacting kids' potential to feel excellent? And this was his answer, and I'm hoping you can hear it, and if you can, I'll come back to it and try to make it louder. Okay, you can't hear it, so hold on.
And depending on the response, different approaches. How much I want young people.
I want to turn back to it, so. Hang in there. All right, you have to listen carefully.
Never let that expression be the ending of the dialogue. That's when it gets started. And depending on the response, different approaches. So if it's, I've realized how much I want young people, it's just like, well, let's work together and do it right now. If it's like, now I'm just, you're bad to me, right? Then you get, but then it's like sometimes it's and so you have to understand where the emotion is coming from, then you learn what to do with it. For those who yell, people think that those folks are the ones who yell loses to. No, I actually love the folks who run, right? For a couple of reasons. It depends on how far you run. Are you running out my school building? Fine. Are you running? I didn't say that. But if you're running away like I quit, fine. Just say, sorry. If it's running because I don't know how to face it, you could say, I understand how you feel like this is so much you want to run away from it. And the thing with teachers is always this. Now let's work on your competitiveness to make it better. And so I didn't get into all that today, but it just is a perfect time to go. Where's the book right? This book. Y'all have you had it? Oh, that's good. Who don't have it? That's good. Go get it. Look, it's an empire. How many of you got students? I got a whole half a penny for each one. I'm telling you. So, but you should get it. And I always help folks get it to read with your status. And the reason why I say that is not because it's top of my order, but because I was very deliberate in the text about practices. All of this I've done today leads you to the emotion. Your only solution to deal with the emotions was my next. And what I tried to do is look at, okay, now, this is the you can have conversations with them who are their experience, how you construct their goals. You can let them do instruction. So like, it goes like, what do you do afterwards? If you leave with an approach to teaching and learning, that becomes a mechanism for healing. You know what I'm saying? So if you run and run away, fine. If you run and stay, that's what we're teaching. Teaching is healing. Not just for the kids, for the teacher. If you teach well, that'll heal you. Anybody that had that feeling before or not? Whoever has a lesson, and you were like, ooh, this is what They're like, yes, but guess what? Some people have never felt that. Some people have never felt that. So you want to give them a teaching practice to allow them to feel that. Once they feel that, they feel it. So that was my easy response. And it's a lot more layers, but
Yeah, and you know what he talks about later? He says, hey, the key to actually having that magical lesson is to relate to the kids. It comes back to relating to the kids, to getting down to them, to getting to where they're thinking, where their head is. So if you're teaching in the hood, Chris will say, you got to relate to them in the hood. If you're teaching in an affluent suburb, I guess you got to relate to them as you would in an affluent suburb. But he says that's the key. It's about relating to your kids and matching their personality, their needs, getting there so you hit them. You hit them on some intimate level. The last workshop I attended, each workshop was about 3 to 4 hours, so we only got to 3 or 4 of them, was all about this, understanding how to work with kids who are in poverty. And this was probably where my biggest learning curve was, and I overcame it somewhat. Check out some of these facts about kids, about poverty in general, but think of kids living in poverty. Love the first fact, the first point, that the facilitator made a point to say, hey, politicians on the left, politicians on the right, Democrats, Republicans, whatever you are, they all have different opinions, but when it comes down to it, you've got to think about poverty holistically. You have to think of it not as a political thing, but as a real thing that with which a lot of data will speak to try to solve. Talked a lot about how when you look at the research, and the individual who ran this workshop, by the way, Ruby Kane, this is her sole work. This is what she does. I think she's based out in Tennessee. So they flew her in. This is all she does. She spends a lot of time collecting quantitative and qualitative data about poverty. And she talks about, according to her research, the most important thing that you can do for somebody in poverty, whether it's a child, a guardian, a parent, is to make sure that those folks connect with other people who could help them along. Because what she says is, through her research, who we know is what we know according to the poverty-stricken individuals. And it's like, I guess it's like that with everybody, right? It's like, it's not just a networking thing. It's who we know who can answer my question. Who do I know who can give me a little lift if I need it, a little inspiration? Who do I know if I need to borrow some money? A bank, a credit card company. It's the who we know, by the way, is not just individuals. It could be institutions, it could be organizations. Unfortunately, people in poverty don't have those connections. They don't necessarily have the who's or the what's. And then, of course, she made a point to distinguish between generational poverty and situational poverty. The first, and I think they're pretty implicit ideas. First being generational poverty. It's one generation after the other that makes it extremely difficult to break. That's a cycle that's really, really hard to break. It's important for educators to know whether the child we have in our classroom is coming out of generational poverty or situational poverty, because then we have to change the way we support that child. Situational poverty could be a sudden circumstance. I know of one particular family currently homeless. I know the background of the family. I know that's situational. It's something that they're dealing with right now for whatever reason. Lost a job, lost a home. The other things that I'd like to share, turnkey to you, also have to do with the facts behind poverty and how they may influence the way we work with students in poverty. This is really interesting. Dr. Payne classified the different rules that different socioeconomic classes live by. Now, a lot of us are in the middle class here in this room, so these are the things that dictate what we do, our work, how we do well in work or with family, our material security. Do we have a job long term? Do we have a mortgage we can pay monthly? Look at what poverty's rules are. It's all about survival. It's about relationships, making sure that there's some family tethered to each other. And entertainment, she was referring to in this case, just day by day, making sure that that the family, the people in the immediate surroundings are positive, or thinking positive, or are somewhat happy despite the circumstances. A couple of other interesting facts. Check this out. One good adult, a teacher, a principal, a supervisor, a paraprofessional, can make the biggest difference in the success of a poverty-stricken child. That's heavy. And I also found these statistics to be a particular note. Look at the way the words we use change depending upon the people with whom we're speaking. What you're looking at, by the way, are in the second to last and the last columns on the right, the number of words that are affirming versus the number of words that are not affirming. What she refers to as discounts. They're demerits, they're takeaways. I mean, if you really buy into this data, it should make us reflect on the words we use when we interact with kids in our classroom, depending on their socioeconomic status. We should be mindful that we may be, especially with those kids in the low SES strata, be using many more discounts than we are affirmations when we're talking to them. And finally, I thought this was interesting. That Dr. Payne talked about the need to rely on your gut instinct, your gut reaction to things, your impulse to survive. She didn't explain why necessarily, but she pointed out that's a reality for those who are poverty stricken. I want to sit at my area. I'm going to shut the projector off and just read a few other takeaways on a list of my notes that I took, and also get out of the feedback loop. So Darcy, if you want to return, you can. And then I'll take any questions anybody has. There's just a couple of other points. We talked at this conference as a group, and sometimes in small group discussions, about the need for systems to be put in place to fight segregation, since there is relatively little a district leader like me can do on his or her own to affect holistic change. And we've talked about this as a board, the need to build in systems, whether it's to work through discipline problems or to desegregate our segregated classes in some of our track classes. One thing Chris said, here's a takeaway quote I want to share. He said, quote, "School reform looks like freedom." And he talked about the pedagogy of freedom. Anyway, I've got lots of notes. I took them as they came. I texted Monique a few times from the conference. Monique is our chair of Equity and Excellence, because I was just so inspired. I really appreciate, again, the board giving me the opportunity to be in Atlanta with my peers. So thank you for everybody's support. Other questions, comments?
So it sounded like it was a really great conference. The thing that struck me, though, was the, I guess, the lack of understanding that, yes, one wonderful teacher can make a difference, but that poverty is not necessarily something that can be solved by education. For me, that's a really big one, because it's personal. I don't want to get into all of the details, but for 99% of the very smart people that I grew up with, not many of them were able to work their way out of difficult situations, financial situations. So I think that there is more there anyway. I mean, I feel like what this conference presented sounded like it was going in the right direction, but that it was, perhaps I didn't pick up on it, but it's a much bigger bigger issue, and that I feel sometimes that we put a lot of pressure on individual educators to be, you know, like the magical magicians that these kids, you know, will talk about in their, you know, their speeches when they're graduating from college or whatever. But I really feel like it's important for us to just think about that, because for lots of people it really doesn't matter, and it's hard to really like wrap your head and your heart around that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, but I do want to be cautious about how much pressure we put on educators.
No,
right?
I totally hear what you're saying.
It's difficult to talk about.
No, but it's really important to look at the systemic barriers as well, which is, I think, what you're
Yes, very
getting
much
at,
so.
is that, you know, it's not fair to put on, you know, a teacher like, okay, you're going to be the one who gets Johnny out of that generational poverty.
Saint
you know,
teacher.
Like, yeah. Because, you know, I went to a education town hall last weekend, and one of the questions that was asked of the people who were there was like, can you name that one teacher who was really inspirational to you? And one of the people who responded to that question didn't give a name of that one amazing teacher, and it was like they had done something horrible that they couldn't come up with that like one amazing teacher. But that's a lot of pressure to put on either person, right? Like either on the teacher or on the kid who's coming up through a system that, you know, there's going to be some savior there that's going to,
Listen,
you know,
it makes
pull
for
you
a
out of
really
this.
good movie.
Yeah. You know, it's a great, you know, feel-good story, but, you know, we've got to work on things.
Systems.
As systems, right, exactly. So
I
you're
would just, no, you go. I was just going to add that I agree with everything. I think this particular conference, though, and conferences like these are really like pep rallies in a sense for teachers who, as Chris Emdin's book talks about, white teachers in the hood who need to get that sort of like, yeah, I know why I'm in this, I'm making a difference. Maybe they did talk about systematic levels of engagement here that affects all the students, but I think the purpose with these sort of conferences is to look at this singular component, right? The one component we do as educators have control over. Yeah. But clearly, you're right, that it is a systematic concern. I did want to just ask a question about the possible collaboration between the district and, I know you're just kind of talking about this to try to bring Chris Edmond here. I also wanted to interject though, because the Graduate School of Education, their urban justice program has some really, really strong, they brought in some really strong new scholars into that program. So I think that would even be a good resource for us to look at, to bring in, that's local, that doesn't cost as much money perhaps as Chris, but who would be really valuable in having these kind of conversations here as well.
What's it called? What's the program called? The urban.
Well, it's the Graduate School of Education's
Right, that part I got.
Urban Education Social Justice Program. I'm probably not getting the name correct, but
Googleable anyway.
their
Urban
graduate
social-
school, their School of Education now has a dedicated, you know, urban education program.
Cool.
And so as a part of that program, they brought in some really high quality, you know, urban educators really trying to support teachers who are working in the hood, as Chris Edmond does. They don't have his name and reputation just yet, but they are just as good in terms of knowing the issues and being able to possibly come here and do the kind of, you know, work that you want to see happen here in terms of really bringing that to our staff. So.
Right. And I think it would be great to be able to put together something like that, because one of the things that we talked about in the last year really wanting to do was to bring the Undoing Racism curriculum into the school, but it is so prohibitively expensive. It's just, the money's just not there for it. So if we could put something
else, yeah, because you're right, that we've left that conversation because, we can't, and then now we've lost it. So, we need to bring
But
that
this
back
would be a
and-
good...
Yeah. We can talk about that in our next Equity and Excellence meeting.
I like that. That sounds like a good idea.
Right now.
And there was a quote that I found, I looked up the book as we were watching the clip, and the quote that I found was pretty insightful, and I wanted to share it with everyone. It was the book title, and this is from the Washington Post article that was written about the book.
But what book? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the for white folks who teach in the hood.
Oh,
and the
Chris's
rest.
book.
Yeah, Chris's book. The book title and its pointed challenge to white teachers to examine their own practice is meant to help teachers turn classrooms into places that are more hospitable and effective and even joyful for kids who often see school as a hostile place that's disconnected from their lives. So this is part of a bigger conversation about the culture and the climate that we have in each building. And unfortunately, I know from being a parent here that there are many times when my kids have used the word prison to describe their experience of certain buildings at certain times. I think that that's for lots of different reasons. It's not, any one particular experience, but there is not, I would say there is not a sense of joy many times that, we discuss this. So that's just, I thought, a really important thing for us to consider when we're talking about climate and culture, that we're not talking about it because it feels good. We're talking about it because it makes us, an extreme difference to kids who should feel safe and happy when they're here, and that should motivate them to be here.
Okay. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I actually wanted to just interject a bit. I guess when we're talking about the sort of stuff that you, I guess, learned in the conference, that, talking about the individuals that can really impact students in terms of equity and helping disadvantaged groups. I think I would like to stress that those individuals, more than any other teacher, I think, are student counselors and school psychologists that help the students in terms of finding work or life after high school. And right now, that's a huge issue in the high school that a lot of students have come to different board reps to really emphasize, is that our counseling staff is really underfunded, and I understand that we already have issues with our budget, but just to relay some of the students' opinions on that.
Yeah, I think this does certainly go back to the larger conversation we were having last week, right? Of all kinds of competing priorities and needs and lack of funding, and yeah. And after a decade of kids being over-tested and teachers being overburdened and classes getting larger, it's not having a great impact on morale for teachers or for students or for just about anybody, unfortunately.
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Yeah, so we really thank all of our teachers who are in there every day, working with our kids and, doing the best of what is very difficult situations for a lot of kids who come to you every darn day. So thank you very much. We can only imagine what it's like. Even being the wife of a teacher, I can't 100% understand what it's like, because he's the one standing there in front of that room of 20 or 30, however many kids with 9 bajillion different needs and experiences. And so it's a lot. Our kids go through a lot, our teachers go through a lot, everybody in our buildings go through a lot. Yeah. And there is no easy fix. There's no, even if we had all the money, there's no easy place to throw all the money to, magically make it all better. There just isn't. But yes, I think you're right that should that magical money fall out of the sky, one of the places that it really does need to go is into, this is kind of something we talked a little bit about last week, and after the meeting I kind of wished I had talked about it a little bit more, was that what I wanted to talk about was how the board really is trying to put the little bit of money that we do have towards these priorities, right? Towards having a dean of restorative practices, towards making sure we have a principal and vice principal in both the middle school and the high school so we can try to get a handle on discipline and behavior, putting Mr. Harrison into the school so we can make sure our hallways are safe, trying to make everyone feel as safe and secure, teachers and students included, as possible, with everybody working with a very difficult set of circumstances. So.
That's my report.
All right, thank you, sir. So we will move on to our board committee reports. We'll start with curriculum and instruction. Michelle, you don't have a lot, and I don't know that you even have anything new from that last week. I don't think you do.
No, I don't think I have anything new at all.
Okay. Anything else? Did you guys meet in the past week, or?
Not in the past week,
No.
no, but, well, there was a conversation that Rob Reslevich started about some of these, well, number 4 precisely, the English 11 with honors option. And so in an email discussion, just the 3 of us, I guess, he was asking about why that wasn't happening across subjects and grade levels, but I think more specifically grade levels. So why were we just talking about English 11 with honors option and not other levels?
I think the biggest answer is because there's still issues that need to be worked out in terms of there's stuff that the board needs to work out with the union. There's training issues. There's we're kind of trying to do this a bit at a time and get as much information back from the teachers who are teaching these classes and from the students who are in these classes so that we can feel more comfortable and confident moving on in a...
That was my educated answer,
Yes.
educated guess answer.
We're putting our second foot into the water,
Yeah.
as it were.
Yeah.
With what grade? What would be the next?
I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think it's even been decided what would be next. And I mean, I think a lot of it also depends on, the teachers who are, interested in getting that additional training and taking that on. And so, I mean, the hope is that it will continue to expand beyond these two courses, but.
Right. Yeah, I think his question was more about grade level, like I said. So he was wondering if there were any answers as to why that wasn't being rolled out in the history department in other grades, younger grades. And I think that in 9th and 10th, we don't have, as far as I understand, we don't have a tremendous difference between the honors classes and the CP classes, but I could be wrong.
I have no idea.
If other classes are going to be integrated into that program?
Rob was asking whether or not we should be rolling out the honors options into lower levels or lower grade levels of history rather than crossing over to the English department.
I think right now we're looking for teachers who are interested in and intrinsically motivated to go here. So I don't know if it's an option necessarily. We don't want to require other teachers to go with honors option. We'd rather them first come to us and say, hey, we'd like to try this. And right now, Mr. McCrae is the individual who's offered to do that. So philosophically speaking, I mean, that's a discussion I could have with Mr. Lassiter, but I don't think it would change our approach. Unless there are other teachers in the lower grades who are interested in being part of this. So far, they haven't expressed interest.
Okay. Yeah, I would assume if they see success that they would be more likely to volunteer.
Right, and hopefully by the end of the year, we're going to have another presentation, right, on how this is going in the classes that it's
I do
happening.
plan on asking Mr. Broadfoot if he'd be willing to come out.
Excellent. Okay. So anything else on curriculum and instruction right now?
Nothing new.
Okay. So let's move on to finance and facilities. Mark?
Yeah, Darcy, thank you. So we have a handful of new items from last week. The first one is on item 3, the cafeteria bill list. That's from March 9th through March 15th. Item 5 is the approval of the treasurer's report, and that's the treasurer of school monies as of January 31st, 2019, and that's coupled with the board secretary's report, and that's Linda certifying that as of January 31st, 2019, no budgetary line item has been overextended in violation of the appropriate regulation. Item number 7 is the board certification that sufficient funds are available to meet the district's financial obligations for the remainder of the year. The next new item is part of item 10, approval of contractors. This is the approval of Title I funds, so that's federal government funding, to the amount of $9,590. It's young audience Young Audiences Arts for Learning. It's an 11-day artist residency, storytelling residency, young audience staff planning and coordination, and it's in essence one 11-day artist residency with 5 classes of 20 to 25 students, and that'll be held in May and June. Item 13 has one new item, which is approval of bedside instruction, and that's for one student at the rate of a tuition rate of $48 per hour, effective March 18th. I think. Oh, I did want to point out again before I go on our acceptance number 14 of the Highland Park Education Foundation grants. Again, I wanted to thank for the board, the HPEF, for a variety of grants to teachers, which we see several times per year. This is for 3 grants in the middle school, 3 grants in the Bartle School, and a grant in the high school. So thank you to the Highland Park Education Foundation.
And also to the teachers for applying for the
And
grants.
yes, and of course for the teachers who applied for this. Then should be more to come. We see these several times a year. And I believe that those are the only new items. I did want to say 1 or 2 very brief words about the new sets of doors in the 2 schools. We are approving bids so that we can put new doors at 2 of our schools. This is a program that we previously have discussed for the last year. It's also something that came out of the School Safety Committee, so we'll be getting more serious entryways in security vestibules at Bartle School and also at the high school. And this is coming from money which is in our capital reserve in the 2019-2020 budget. So much as the Title I funding, which is federal money, it's not coming out of the tax collections, so to speak. This is also coming out of money which is not impacting the budget for 2019-2020, in as much as coming out of a capital reserve, which currently has approximately $800,000 in it, and has to be budgeted and used for capital improvements of the schools.
So Mark, to clarify, that cannot be taken, we can't take money out of that and use it to say hire a new teacher.
We cannot take money out of that except for the purpose of a capital improvement of our schools.
Right, and all this is doing is getting Bartle and the high school to the same place that Irving and the middle school are. Irving and the middle school are the newer buildings.
Sure.
This is how newer buildings tend to be built, with this double entry glass so people can see who is out there. Right. Bartle and the high school don't have that, so this is...
And I did, I'm sorry, please.
Oh, I just was going to ask, I think I might have missed this at the last meeting. Is it Bartle or the high school that was going to have some sort of a shatterproof glaze attached to the windows that was going to make them significantly more expensive? Both of them?
Yeah.
What kind of expense are we talking about with that?
That's going to be done at a later time. That's not part of the project.
Oh.
We'll be buying the material and installing it ourselves.
I see, that's not part of the 21,000. No. Okay, I see.
And there are several components to the capital funding in 2019. This is one of them. More security towards a better camera system, cloud-based camera, modern camera system. Also some roof improvements. Also with the possibility that the county and the borough would pay for the large majority of the improvements to the replacement for the field and the track. $175,000 is being budgeted for those improvements from our capital reserve. If that doesn't happen, let's say the county doesn't approve a grant, that money will just get rolled over into next year. I did want to make one other thing more clear, because a few of the board members have asked me privately about the computer initiative, both for the students and our teachers. That's money that's being put in via a lease. It's a 4-year lease is what's being proposed and I believe will be done. That will include every teacher, or at least every classroom with a teacher, having their own laptop on loan from the district, a new modern laptop, and also every student from 6th grade, I believe, through 12th grade, getting a Chromebook. The Finance Committee evaluated what have we been spending to buy equipment piecemeal over the last 5 to 8 years. And what we realized was if instead of buying piecemeal, we simply did a lease, a 4-year lease, we could buy in effect for everyone, or lease for everyone. And that would mean that all students would have their own Chromebook and all teachers would have their own loan leased laptop in their classroom. And this won't cost, if anything, very, very much more than what we had already planned to budget for replacement computers on carts and replacement laptops for teachers whose laptops had become obsolete or weren't working. The difference might have been $5,000 or $10,000 in either direction in a $36 million budget. So we're very hopeful that this will make for great improvements for both teachers and for students, without incurring any extra costs appreciable than what we've been spending for the past few years, for the past 8 or 9 years.
And the biggest concern was one of the concerns that the board has brought up time and time again, which is equity concerns about how homework is assigned, who does or doesn't have access to computers.
Right.
Students that can't get their work done because they don't have access to a computer. So the combination of students in grade 6 through 12 having their own devices and the late bus that we've been able to institute, we're hoping will address a lot of those concerns and make it much more possible for a larger swath of our student body to actually complete the work that they're being assigned.
Right, and exactly, and as I said last week, if anyone who didn't hear, this came out of board discussions at this table, but also policy committee discussions where we were discussing what could we do in policy to implement a homework program that made sense for the district. And the only program that made sense for the district would be that every student where they might get a homework assignment that required a computer would have a computer, because like many other districts in the state, we're going to provide that computer for the students through the lease program.
I wanted to point out that there was a lot of thought given to just getting rid of online homework. I mean, not by Mark or by Dr. Taylor, but there were suggestions to that effect because this board has sort of a long-time resistance to spending money on tech when we could be spending money that directly impacts students, this directly impacts students. We could be spending money on staff. We could be spending money on other types of programs. However, it just became clear that it was not going to be feasible to outlaw online homework and computer homework, as much as some board members might, like myself, might have hesitated to, weren't that enthusiastic about online homework. So that's why we're doing it, because we can't have some students, a good chunk of our students, unable to do their homework. It's not, I'd rather not spend the money, even the extra $10,000. But I think that given that we feel the technology is, the way of the future, and teachers are very committed to it in their curricula, there really wasn't a huge amount of choice.
And we also felt when we did this budget that the teachers deserve to have modern equipment.
Oh, the teachers themselves, yes, absolutely.
And when we looked at the budget,
that was no question.
So to lease that extra equipment, and what were we going to spend on upgrading old equipment? Right. It just made absolutely no sense to do anything different. And we had input from Keith and from the association on this, and other board members. And I think I hate to say this trite statement, but we're in the 21st century. And I think our students really should learn.
Yes.
If they are, getting homework, and it can be done more easily and better as a learning experience on the computer. This is a useful thing.
Yeah, this doesn't mean we want to replace our teachers with computers or have all online work in our classes or any of those things. And, I am quite certain that the curriculum committee is, going to be working ardently to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Right.
But for me, it very simply became an equity issue.
Right.
It was the simplest solution to a really persistent equity issue that we have not been able to solve.
So I just wanted to interject really quickly, but part of this equity issue is outside of our control, and I think that everyone listening should make a point of learning more about what's happening in the world of net neutrality legislation.
Yeah.
This is a tremendous part of this conversation, especially when we talk about equity issues, because having access to Wi-Fi is something that many of us might take for granted.
Well, but the computers are going to be set up so the students don't require having Wi-Fi to do.
Yeah,
Could you explain some of that to the?
Yeah, no, I can't. I don't know how to do that. But that's certainly part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Is that they're not going to be required to have the Wi-Fi to do what they need to do.
That's wonderful.
So teachers will be modifying the online curriculum so that it can be.
John says, I think it was Christina actually who pointed out that we have some way of setting up the Chromebooks so that students will be able to use them, even the whole Google suite of apps or whatever,
offline.
being able to do it online. Clearly, they're not going to be able to collaborate with classmates,
Right.
but
They can sit together.
But then
and do
also, when the students have their own laptops and they can be here after school because now there's a late bus,
Right.
they will have that opportunity to collaborate and use the district's Wi-Fi and not have to go to Dunkin' Donuts or go, whatever. So all that's been, no one's saying it's going to be perfect, and, nothing is ever perfect or 100% equitable, but I think we're making it as equitable as we humanly can.
I was talking in the broad terms.
Right. Well, I just want to kind of keep us a little grounded. we can be like,
I just want to make sure that we really do a lot of PD to make sure everybody knows how to use Google Suites offline. That's not evident to a lot of relatively fluent users like myself.
There is going to be a learning curve.
I'm sure there is, but I hope that there will be some direct top-down direction. Did not expect teachers to sort of figure it out on their own, or sort of figure out if there's any students that don't have Wi-Fi, that sort of thing.
I have a quick question about maintenance. I know, Mark, we talked about this before, but can you just talk about the cost of the maintenance when you're under a lease system like this? How does that work? Is that budgeted into?
Yeah, for one thing, we've ordered a fair amount of extra machines which come under the budget that in effect replace the piecemeal purchasing. So let's say well, first of all, the machines will be insured to a certain extent by the district. We will have extra machines. We do have sufficient staff now to manage those machines. If a machine gets misconfigured, that can, in the software, that can be rectified by our staff. If a machine literally breaks, we do have those spares that we put into the lease. And again, on a case of a stolen machine, a lost machine, there have been extra machines allotted so that we have something to give a student very quickly. And I would, there's a lot of information. A few years ago, we looked at this, and there was very little information about it, and only a few districts were doing this, a handful of districts. There's a lot more information now. So if you go online and you look at the kind of agreements that a family signs when the machine gets assigned to their child, that's been thought through by a lot of districts. I mean, not a lot, but the districts that have done it. And we have a very good template, which Christina Nicosia has access to, for us to start to have a starting point, so that we can give those out and properly maintain and update and replace machines as warranted. It's not going to be perfect. There are going to be glitches, but this has to just be far better in 2019 than depending on people having machines at home, students having machines at home.
Okay, if everybody's good there, I'd like
Just
to
one more question for, I guess for Scott.
So just like Mark was describing how our capital reserve money is earmarked for certain projects and cannot be used in another way, can you talk a little bit about Title I funds and how those should be appropriated?
Well, I can give you a brief overview. I used to be the Title I coordinator in Little Silver. So you can only use ESSA funds, Elementary and Secondary Success Act.
Education Act.
Also, thank you. Title I, II, III, and IV. IV is sometimes provided for technology for certain purposes. Your school either has to be designated a Title I school, or, as we think we will become, your district can be considered, or school-wide, they refer to it as, can be considered able to use those funds. We will not necessarily receive additional federal money in Title I if we're district-wide, but it means we have more flexibility of its use. Oftentimes, the target populations are your low socioeconomic students, your ESL students. That's what Title III monies are used for. For Title I, besides low socioeconomic status students, it could be students who the state has identified are lagging on the standardized test results behind their peers. And for us, it's depending on the school, it's usually your students of color, your Hispanic students, your special education students, and your low socioeconomic students. So you can't just use Title I money for anything. You have to use it for those specific purposes. And the coordinator, who for us is Jen Knapp, has to have written in the application what those funds are going to be used for ahead of time.
Oh, so it's sort of like applying for a grant. She has to apply for that Title I?
It's very, yes. In fact, they call it an entitlement grant.
So
We're
it's
entitled
already
to
been delineated when it goes out to the feds as to what it's going to be used for, and they approve of it or not.
Correct. And there's a lot of reporting. Jennifer has to do a whole report in June coming up to show that all the money was used appropriately.
And she's the one who's been staying on top of trying to get us approved to be a Title I district, which is sometimes, we were talking about it a few weeks ago. Sometimes we miss the application by, 0.3%, and they won't approve it. So it looks like she's gotten it across the finish line, but we'll see. So do we know what this Young Audiences Arts for Learning, is that a particular building or?
I believe that's Irving, but let me get back to you on that.
Okay, because it is a big chunk of change.
Yeah,
It's a really big chunk of change. It would be nice to have a little more information about that.
Do you want to table it?
If it's possible without, I'm sorry? Right.
Why don't we table it? I'll have Ms.
It'd be nice
Knapp
to
get
get
back
a
to me.
little more information on such a big expense, even though it is Title I funds, but. Yeah. Okay. So we'll table that and get a little bit more information for next month. All right. Are there any other questions on any of the finance and facilities items?
No,
Nope.
thank you.
Okay. So can we move on to personnel, Ann?
Yes, we can. All right, let's see here. Let me get to personnel here. All right, there are very few new things compared to what we discussed at last week's workshop agenda. We have a new maternity replacement hire. This is Cassandra Serrano, at Irving School. I understand that she has been working in the classroom for quite some time, for all of the school year so far, I think, in the classroom where she will be now serving as the maternity leave replacement. So that's wonderful for our students to have someone who's already familiar with that classroom and with their specific students. We're very lucky in that regard. We have a new staff member being added to this list of staff being paid to write material modification lesson plans. Are those for students with special needs, Scott? That's personnel number 4.
Sorry, which number?
Personnel number 4.
Okay.
Writing material
Yeah,
modification.
hold on, let me get back to it. I'm almost positive.
It must be a differentiation thing.
So these are for the teachers who covered a program that Ms. Klaslow vacated when she moved to Irving. These teachers provided the substitute who we hired the plans to implement.
That's right. I think you did tell us about that, and I just forgot. Hold on one second. We have a new, number 9 is a new maternity disability / childcare leave. I see we have a volunteer I just lost it. Volunteer softball coach at the middle school, Ms. McManus Smith. Thank you. May I ask, just as an academic matter, why is that a volunteer position for a staff member? Is that just because she's nice, or why are we not paying her?
I had to ask her. I'm guessing she wants more experience in the coaching field, and this is one way to do it, but we can talk about that later, Ms. McManus Smith.
I assume this has already been worked out, but I was curious to know why there was no paycheck listed here for Ms. McManus Smith. But I'll leave that to your investigatory powers. Thank you, Ms. McManus Smith, either way. I'm sure if you are paid, it's not going to be that much. Okay, number 24, we have approval of a source for teachers substitute for volunteering. Scott, I didn't understand what this means. Does this mean that a source for teachers sub that just wants to observe classes for her own?
And also assist.
Sorry?
Correct. And also assist in the intervention class, since she's a substitute.
So is she volunteering, or are we hiring her through source for teachers? I mean,
Correct. So she's an individual who's on our Source for Teachers approved list, but who also wants to pick up some observation time, so she simply wants to observe this day.
I see. This is part of her education.
Correct.
I see. Thank you. Approval of district overnight chaperones. I have an addition to that. This is number 25 is a list of staff members who will be chaperoning various overnight trips. And to that list for Camp Bernie, wow, is Bartle back at Camp Bernie now, not at Camp Mason?
It seems so. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just the sort of title of the program. No, it's Camp Bernie
No, it's
again.
a camp.
Okay, all right. Well, no, I know it was, it was a camp. There's 3 new teachers to be added to the list. I think, Linda, you already have this, but I'll read it to the record. 3 additional chaperones. I'm moving that we pay 3 additional chaperones for overnight trips. Ms. Stratodakis, Andrew Berenger, is that how you pronounce that? And Amanda Yonks for Camp Bernie, 2 nights at $85 per night. And that seems like not enough money to pay staff to spend a night at Camp Bernie. Based on my husband's experience, it was $85 was a chump
We do it for
change.
love.
Wait, and our husbands paid to go.
Yeah, they paid to go. They paid $150. Wait a minute.
They paid for the privilege.
I had a great time. I
Out of
loved it.
love.
Yeah, you loved it. I'm glad I have boys. I was not motivated to go on that trip. Okay, so and after that, and that would be it.
All right. Anybody have anything for Ann?
Yeah, could I ask you about number 3, or make a comment about number 3?
Is that the maternity
Yes.
replacement? Yes, go ahead. We emailed about this.
Yeah, we discussed it, and I discussed it with Ruth, because Ruth was so kind to point out to me that one option for, which we discussed 2 or 3 years ago in the budget, for long-term substitutes was hiring them at a fixed rate through Source for Teachers. And we did that for a while, and it's kind of stopped. And I know it was difficult, but we're really in a seriously difficult place financially right now. So I'm going to vote for this. I certainly wouldn't not vote for this. I'm going to vote for number 3. But I would like the Finance Committee to discuss it again. For Scott and for Linda, at our next meeting, we should put this on the agenda, a discussion of long-term substitutes, because I believe 2 years ago we budgeted based on using Source for Teachers for long-term substitutes. The board discussed it, the committee discussed it. There were very significant savings. And again, it was difficult, especially for certain areas, to find substitutes. But we're in the place now that we need to look at everything, and this is something we should look at.
I think I recall that too. I think I also recall that we had brought in at least a couple at that rate, who then left for full jobs. So I wonder, could you bring to that meeting, Scott, an analysis of what happened, how many we may have brought in since that time at the flat rate, what happened to them, what was the success rate, and why we would want to go in a different direction perhaps in the future.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that idea and what some other districts do. The example is Edison, which has a flat rate You want to be a long-term...
40,000.
40,000.
That's it. It doesn't matter.
Annualized 40,000 rate. And they're a very large district. They may have lots of needs in lots of areas, and it may be easier for them. But it would be good to know how it worked, why it did or didn't work, and see what the right course would be after we've done it once before.
Could I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So would you envision us still going out and interviewing a range of people to find the best person and then sort of asking them to contract with Source for Teachers? Or would you envision just going out to the pool of Source for Teachers?
It's the latter. The former, pardon me, the former. So we would interview people, telling them though that this is the rate you'll be hired at, and sign up if you haven't already for Source for Teachers, and we'll hire you off the list. We did this for a number of people.
Sure.
As Rob points out, it may not have worked perfectly. It was harder to, or well even, it was harder to find the people. I would rather do it this way, frankly. But we really have issues, and every dollar counts. I was going to say penny, but pennies are another story. Dollars, every dollar counts, and every $10,000 counts.
I mean, if there are 5 of those, and we save $13,000 on each one of them over the course, or a portion of that prorated during the year, that's
it's a significant
job.
amount of money.
Job.
And I think that year we lowered the budget line, if I remember, it's a while ago, by $40 or $50 or $60,000. It was a significant amount. So I just want to revisit it. I don't have a perspective. I'd like to get more information.
No, point well taken.
And I will vote for this.
I'm not sure about the middle school, but in terms of substitute teachers, in the high school, we still have them, but it's also done by just putting all of the classes in the cafeteria. So if you're looking for ways to save money,
right, that was another
savings
institute that we did.
That was done the same year as a savings, as a way to have savings. The committee, but I would say really Linda more than us, as we discussed it, what does it cost us to have substitute for every class every time someone is out versus what many districts did in the past, which is to put all of the students in one place with 1 or 2 or whatever number of substitutes. There was significant savings and often not very much difference, for that one day. So we did it. And I think it has given us some savings.
It'd be good to know how it's working I remember at the time we first discussed this, there was some concern about kids, with special needs and kids who maybe need extra support in large, unstructured social environments. It'd be nice to know if there have been any incidents or if we've been able to put para support in there, particularly, I don't know if this is just at the high school or if it's done just at the high school. Still would be good to know if there, could we find out about that?
It actually brings to mind another partially related question related to Source for Teachers itself in terms of how well we are actually doing filling openings that exist during a school day. Let's say we have 10 or 15 or 20 and we go out to Source for Teachers. Are we filling those? I mean, are they doing a good job for us in terms of filling 1 day or 2 day or 5 day slots? That's a separate question.
And are there options?
I mean, I don't know how well that's going. I kind of have my doubts.
Scott, I think that's mostly for you, that question. How is that going? Do we have any hiccups when it comes to using Source for Teachers to provide us substitutes on a day-to-day?
We still have a problem, and it's still we still daily have unfilled positions.
We do, okay.
My colleagues, we've actually came up at a superintendent roundtable meetings, we just threw out the question, hey, does anybody have a really good substitute service? Seems like the systemic problem is there are just not enough substitutes to go around. One thought that came across my desk, I think it was a meeting I had with one of our faculty. was to raise our sub-pay rate.
Didn't we already do
We
that?
raised it substantially.
But to attract,
We already did, though.
We did that.
well, but do it again,
Again?
because apparently we're not, I haven't done the research, but we
no,
might not be in
no.
competition.
No, we're very competitive right now. We don't need to raise that.
Well,
We don't need to raise
it came up.
Come, speaking as the substitute teacher at the
It came
table.
up. And I know that's a difficult question topic to bring up during this difficult budget time, so.
Scott, I did want to give some perspective from 25 and 30 years ago on my last board tenure, which was that the situation of getting substitute teachers into the classroom, which was done back then by making phone calls from a phone list. And somebody was responsible, someone in the system, I don't even know who, but somebody in the system, it might have been per school, it might have been done out of the central office. Someone got on the phone and made phone calls the day before or the morning of, and spent as much time as they needed to get the substitutes. It was a nightmare. It came up every month. And it wasn't just difficult to fill position, it was impossible to fill positions, and it was time consuming, and it was labor consuming, and that's why you have a business now called Source for Teachers and perhaps others, because they make that job, they fill the need that we have and other districts have. Some entrepreneur type got the idea, let's do this, and they did it. But it was worse. It was a constant problem. My wife, Nora, who many of you know, was home raising our kids, and as the kids got older, she first did substituting, and then went back to teaching, and then went to ended up at the university teaching. And she did substituting, and when she was available, when she put her name on the list with Highland Park as an available sub, we got called every single morning. They could not find anyone. So it has to be a worse situation. Maybe times have changed, I don't know. But it was a terrible situation.
With Source for Teachers, Scott, do you know, is there such a thing as a hybrid plan where you perhaps, well, let's say we had 10 people on a list or whatever that would be our go-to people that may not be Source for Teachers but are certified, where we could use those people as well as the Source for Teachers
That's
people.
intriguing. No,
I mean, some of those may be local people.
We could do anything we want.
I don't know.
I assume we can do anything we want.
Yes, right.
We have a contract.
I don't know.
Yeah. Let's chew on this maybe next month.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea. All right, if nobody has anything else for personnel, let's move on to policies.
Okay, so we only have the one policy. It's for second reading. It's the suicide prevention policy, which we've discussed now for a month or more, maybe 2 months or more. And I just recommend, as we have this as a recommendation of the superintendent, we've all spent a lot of time on this in policy, and I think we recommend that this is an excellent improvement over what we've had. And we are meeting in a week or two, and we'll have some more. I hope we'll have a number of, we've spent so much time on this, we will spend time on some new policies and have something to bring forward in the next month or two.
Awesome. I went through it today and printed it out. I had found just a few typographical things that need to be tweaked. Nothing that changes meaning or anything.
Terrific.
Just so I will give that to you. Remind me after the meeting.
Okay. Could you perhaps give it to Scott, because I think Susan has the master copy.
Okay, I'll do that. Does anybody have any questions about that policy or anything else? My only quick comment is, one thing that I think we keep maybe not following up on is, I think Strauss Esme is supposed to give us a list of policies that need to be reviewed yearly, and I'm not sure we're
we've been following
all
it.
the-
In fact, what we do is we set up our agenda to pick away at the audit. A couple of things have bumped our progress, but we follow it religiously. Yeah. Yeah, we've been doing a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, Scott's been setting an agenda based on the required policies
Right.
that we're behind on.
Right, because we get the alerts, but then
Right.
there's also like a subset that is like, these you're supposed to review every year.
Yes. Scott's been putting those together. We have a nice list. Many of them, I think if we hadn't spent so much time on the attendance and the lateness and the suicide prevention, that list, many of those items on that list are really relatively simple to go through. I think if we hadn't spent the hour on those or 2 hours on those as opposed to the hour or two repeatedly on the attendance, lateness, and suicide prevention, we would knock those right through those.
Okay.
And I don't think any of them are very difficult or controversial.
Okay, good. I'm glad that they're, I just
Yeah, no,
wanted to make sure that
we're
they're
doing well
still-
with this.
Okay, awesome.
Can I ask about that though? Are you still going to alert equity and excellence as to the policies that do pertain to equity issues and when they come up through the docket, so to speak?
That's a
How
good
are we
point.
ensuring that-
We were, I mean, originally, my idea, before I sort of lost track of everything, was, every time we had policies that were coming up, to farm them out to the committees. So like, if I knew in advance we're going to be discussing restraint, I would farm that out to, and then I sort of stopped doing that when I was policy chair because I ran out of time. So that's something we certainly should do.
I will make sure to do that.
I'm sure Mark will do it.
I will make sure to do that.
I was not a role
promise.
model for Mark in that regard, unfortunately.
I'm good at that. I will make
Well, it's
sure.
also good just to kind of share the burden. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
So
yeah.
policy isn't responsible for every single last policy. Okay, Monique, do you have anything for us for equity and excellence?
We haven't met since last week.
Okay.
So nothing to share.
All right. All right, so that brings us to public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. If anybody would like to make public comment, now's the time. You can go up to the podium and just make sure you please state your name and if you're a resident, address for the board secretary so she can record that. Or if you're staff, you can just say your staff.
Hi. Lynn Fryer, 314 Wayne Street, Highland Park. The acoustics...
And make sure you write it down too, Lynn.
Okay.
before you
The
leave.
acoustics in this room are really
Awful.
bad. But I did come with a couple of things on my mind. I guess with the doors, I'm happy to hear that the funding is coming from a capital budget line, so I guess I'm placated about that. But I've also heard that the home ec programs have been targeted for being removed, and that makes me sad, and I don't think that that's really appropriate. I think there's a lot of non-academic college-bound students that, and other students, I mean, I think these are life skills that all students should have access to, and I understand that the budget's really tight, but I would encourage you to look elsewhere to find something to cut, but I don't envy any of you, so.
Thank you. I appreciate that qualifier. I don't envy us either.
That's it.
Thank you, Lynn.
Could I ask a question about the home ec? I think that was a surprise to a number of people. Did curriculum weigh in on that, and what that would mean for course offerings for our students? Is that something that the curriculum committee was able to discuss, Michelle?
We did not discuss it as a committee, and I don't think that it was something that was, presented as a, hard and fast decision, but, so
Yeah, it's
I
a
assume...
preliminary budget.
Right, so because it was a preliminary budget, I thought that that would be, something that we should talk about as a committee. And, the bottom line is that I do feel like we are all on the same page when it comes to priorities. So I didn't freak out as committee chair, but I do feel like we should discuss it.
And personnel will be discussing it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Did I read somewhere or hear, maybe I watched last week's meeting from home, that the numbers were down in those classes? That was part of the reasoning behind the decision?
Well, not in home ec, I don't think.
Yes.
Oh, in home ec it was? Oh, I thought it was just the Bartle classes. I see.
Our numbers went down slightly, but that wasn't really the rationale.
Okay.
I mean, we've had roughly between, the middle of the 50s to the low 60s each semester in that class. Oh, actually, in all the classes that Ms. Mitchell teaches, including baking and other home economic related courses. So that there wasn't really behind. That wasn't so much the decision, the rationale behind the decision.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the numbers. What was the difference?
Yeah, what was?
That wasn't clear. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Could you say the numbers again, like how much
I
it
can
decreased
actually give
by?
you exact numbers if you'd
That'd be
like.
great. The acoustics are really bad, Scott. It's just so hard to hear you.
Acoustics here, too. This room, it's because the room is so large.
It's a gym.
So just to kind of go to this issue of was personnel notified or was it discussed in curriculum? When we're preparing the budget, I think we mentioned this at the last meeting, those decisions are the absolute last ones to be put on the table. It's not like we made that decision 2 months ago and didn't tell personnel and curriculum. Well, I just want to make this clear because it does kind of come across as committees are being left in the dark or something, and that's just not, well, I mean, it is how it's coming across. So I want to make it clear that that's not what's happening. There's a whole process that we go through over the course of months where the different building administrators come, where we look at all those different budgets. Scott then goes back to them and says, we need to take even more from that. This is not a process anybody wants to engage in to decide what it is and where we're going to cut. And certainly, as we discussed last week, the last place we ever want to cut is personnel. So that is the absolute last place that we're looking. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say about it other than, that's the last ditch effort every single time. And I want to make it very clear that we're not making those decisions lightly or without looking at as much information as possible, without considering every other possible thing first. One of the things I've asked Scott to look at is how many staff we've added in the last few years. And it's a tremendous amount. We've increased our staff, even with scaling back, if we need to, 4 or 5 paraprofessionals and 1 or 2 staff members. The numbers are still way up over the last 2 to 3 years. So we're not, we're not looking to slash anywhere. We're trying to be as responsible as we possibly can and impact as few students as we possibly can. And it's difficult. Nobody wants to make that decision. Ever.
And there was an article in I think it was in the Star Ledger, maybe it was just NJ.com, I don't know. This is not something that's just happening here in Highland Park. This is
and actually that article kind of annoyed me because it was, a lot's being framed around S2 and around the districts that are receiving less funding, and of course, totally sucks to be getting even less funding, but we're not in that category. We're not in the getting less funding category. We're supposedly in the, yay for us, we got more funding. But in grand total, again, we talked about this last week, we got $180-something thousand. Almost 40 of it went straight to charter schools. Another almost 40 of it came off the top for pre-K. Somehow they decided you need less money for your pre-K students. So we got a grand total of an extra $100,000 from the state. That's our big windfall. And we're getting letters from our legislators saying, here I am, I'm fighting for you in Trenton. What? No. Fighting for us in Trenton would look a lot different than $100,000. So,
I almost feel like we should be budgeting in like the salary to put a lobbyist down in Trenton.
Good luck with that.
So I do have some numbers. So this year, Ms. Mitchell's first semester student load is 51 total. Her second semester student load is 55 total across the class. Four classes she teaches. That does not include Team Pep.
5 plus Team Pep. Including Team Pep.
Okay,
5.
that didn't include Team Pep in this case. I was just focusing on the programming,
Right.
numbers. Last year, Ms. Mitchell's first period student load was 56. Her second period student load was 75. So the numbers are going down, but that wasn't necessarily That wasn't
But one of the
decided.
things that we do look at every year is undersubscribed classes. And it was the reason a couple of years ago for discontinuing Hebrew was
Right.
that the numbers just weren't there. When we see classes that have less than 10 students in them, we have to take a look at that. We just do. I mean,
Nick, and keep in mind, reflecting on some of the numbers that Darcy alluded to, since this new board and I and Linda started the budget planning process, the fiscal year 16 budget was the first budget that we actually all worked on collaboratively. Since that time, we have added 20, and that includes the riffing and elimination of teachers. This next year, we added 22 full-time staff between teachers and paraprofessionals. That's a net. So that's
That's from 2015?
since the 15-16 budget.
Wow.
We've added
Right.
22
And we have
staff.
not increased.
That includes regular ed, special ed, paraprofessionals, an additional CST member, Regina Strenger, the behaviorist. And again, that includes any reductions in force over the last few years, as well as next year's reduction in force. So
20 makes sense.
and our student numbers haven't gone up drastically. They've gone up enough, though. I think what this reflects is the inordinate needs our special needs population particularly has. There's a lot of those FTEs, those full-time staff are paraprofessionals.
And frankly, I don't know how we're doing this, because with that, we are also getting these 8, 10, 12, 14% insurance increases every year, plus our contractual obligations. And when you add it all up, we can raise taxes 2 or 3 or 3.5%. And I mean, I sometimes sit at home at night going over numbers, which is what I like to do. And it's astonishing to me that we can get a budget out under these circumstances. And the board, as to the being sad about that program going away, no one on the board is happy about this. When we talked about this, we were all pretty horrified. That's where we have to go. And I would say emails are still going around amongst the finance committee about what can we do, because there's no joy here. It's where we're placed. The state could make a few simple changes, including in those changes might be a more rational look at what are reasonable increases for staff year over year, plus the cost of the insurance, and what does it mean you really should be raising taxes. And that number, probably shouldn't say this, is not 2%, it's higher, because it's virtually impossible to make these budgets a balance with a tax increase like that.
Okay.
It's virtually impossible.
I want to get back to public comment.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Is this on? Hello? Okay, I'm very nervous to be in front of a microphone. I'll make it short. I'm Christina Stocky, and I'm a teacher here. I'm a reading intervention teacher. But I really stand up here again because of what you have been talking about and the budget cut for the home economic position. I'm Italian. It's really a big thing in my family to cook and enjoy the cooking. And even if it's just a little plug from one other person to try to keep that program, I just felt I'm going to go out of my comfort zone and come to a microphone. But I want to just tell you my experience. I could not get my boys to want to cook. And although they have uncles and brothers and uncles and cousins that cook, they wouldn't cook until they came to the home economic class, which was, it wasn't mandatory, but it was strongly suggested and really pushed. And I am so thankful because I would come home and my kids would be making all kinds of different rices. And of course, they were in high school, so I allowed them to do simple cooking like hard-boiled eggs. They could choose. But they were making amazing rice dishes and all kinds of things. I couldn't tell you my gratitude for the home economic class. To this day, my kids now have been inspired to cook. And I just know one of my students that were here in the special ed program, that was her dream, is to go on to be in the culinary arts. And it is an art, and it's an amazing art. And so I hope you look at it like that too, because it's an important art that gets missed, and a lot of these kids it might open up a world to them if they were just exposed to how to use the kitchen, because many parents don't cook anymore. And it's so much fun. Really, it is so much fun, and it's a whole like hobby and art too. And June's program, the GLOW program, is so amazing. They're learning this very important life skill, and if they don't have a kitchen, I mean, they won't understand even to do the basic make an egg, you know, and helping cleaning, even if it's not even if they can't do the egg themselves one day, they're learning how to clean and put away and their way around a kitchen. I'm just like heartbroken that this is, I don't envy you at all, because I can't even imagine how you're going to try to fit this in. I mean, it could even cut me off, you know, one day, but, and I understand that, but I would hope that, you know, with my intervention program, you know, it's an extra. But home economics, I hope you don't think of it as like an extra, because it really is a very, very important thing to have for this, especially the GLOW kids. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Ms. Stuckey. Actually, that was something that we, emails that have gone around between the Finance Committee, is how that would impact the GLOW program and how that facility could potentially still be used. So that is absolutely on our radar.
Okay. Sorry, just writing my ass.
Don't be sorry.
So I came here with a speech. Sorry. My name is Uchechi Odikanwa, and I live in 14 Highland Avenue, South Highland Park. And one of my jobs at the school is I'm actually the student body president of our school. So one of my jobs there is to listen to the voices of concern that a lot of the students are giving. And I'm here to speak on the behalf of the student body about the discontinuation of family consumer science departments and the termination of 6 professionals. As this news actually traveled through the high school, a lot of sadness and questioning on why this event is even happening has arisen, and the only answer I could really give was because of budget cuts. And a lot of people, including me, don't see this as like a good answer. There are too many advantages of having a home economics department and more paraprofessionals around. Without them, the student body will only suffer. Cutting teachers would certainly make Highland Park students less prepared for their future and less successful for our school and in the future. When asking the opinion of some students on them, they said, and I quote, "Paras are one of the main reasons why I'm successful in large classes with one teacher, and I wouldn't have been successful in Bartle without them. Paraprofessionals play some of the biggest roles in the life of the children and are absolutely essential to their learning." My another point is, with the loss of the departments, students will miss out on an opportunity of classes to shape the rest of their lives, like many previous speakers have addressed. Family consumer science teaches skills such as cleaning, healthy eating, child development, tailoring, and so much more that is a life skill that a lot of kids need. I personally can say, for example, is that if I had never taken Ms. Mitchell's class in freshman year and following up to senior year, I would not step foot in my kitchen. I wouldn't know how to boil eggs. I wouldn't know how to even cook rice. I wouldn't know how to do anything in the kitchen, or even tailor my own clothes, or like do anything that's a life skill that I'm going to need after I'm done with high school or move out of my house. And it builds skills that students should know, and by removing that, it's only harming a lot of kids in our school. And my last point is mainly addressing a lot of the problems that minority kids in our school have, specifically the African American kids, is that there's only 5 African American teachers here in Highland Park High School, and with the loss of a home economics department, we lose Ms. Mitchell, which is one of those 5s. Not only is she a great teacher, but she's a great person who students actually go to combine feelings that they have or just to talk to. And after talking to one of my senior classmates, an issue that she expressed to me, and I quote, "Ms. Mitchell has been someone that I go to whenever I'm free, and she has shared with me her perspective of life and with experiences. I can honestly say that they have helped me during difficult times and made me a better person. So that's all I have to really say, for example, but
That's a lot.
yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing all of that. And I would love to, one thing that we talked about last week and that Dr. Taylor and Mr. Krieger and I are working on is to sit down and meet with our legislators about the issues that we're experiencing financially in terms of our budget. I would love to invite you, if you would like to attend that meeting with our legislators so you can really get a better sense of kind of like this big global picture that I know it's hard to, I'm sure it's hard to make sense of for your fellow classmates what a budget restriction like we're facing is like, but I would love for you to be able to have a deeper sense of that if that's something that would interest you.
That's great.
So I'll have Dr. Taylor reach out to you about that.
Hi, my name is June Miller. I am a special education teacher at the high school. This is my 15th year with the Highland Park School District. I am very proud to say that I have been teaching the GLOW program since its inception. I'm speaking tonight because I am very concerned about the adverse effect that I believe the elimination of the home economics program will have on the GLOW program. As you know, a primary focus of the GLOW program is to teach the students independent living and transition skills to use when they leave high school. Many of the students in the program are students who have either returned to district after spending several years in out-of-district placements or students whose parents have considered sending them to out-of-district placements. I have attended almost every IEP meeting for the students in this program. In order to encourage the parents to keep the students in our district, the differences between the program we offer here at Highland Park and out-of-district placements are discussed. The deciding factor in keeping these students here is our ability to demonstrate to the parents that we offer everything and more that the out-of-district placements offer. Our home economics program is almost always brought up as an integral part of our program. It is probably the most frequently requested elective by the parents of the GLOW students. Without this program, I do not know how we will be able to persuade parents that our program is superior to those of the out-of-district placements. Additionally, Terry Mitchell has been an absolutely invaluable resource to me. As part of the GLOW program, I have planned several brunches, bake sales, etc. Terry has given up her free time to assist us and share the knowledge that only someone who has experience teaching this subject could have. And I'm going to digress from my speech just to add, it's nothing to me to have a dinner in my house, 25 people. I love it. I can cook for it. Doing it and teaching it are not the same thing. I sympathize with the difficult decisions that the board must make in creating a budget. I truly, truly do. However, I also believe that the elimination of the home economics program will, 1, result in a decline in the quality of the program we offer in our district, and 2, result in additional out-of-district special education costs, as it will be much more difficult to prove to parents that we can offer the same program in our school as the out-of-district placements also are able to offer. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. We appreciate your input.
Dan Mladnick, teacher at the middle schools, Global Civics, and resident 216 Graham Street. I want to just share with you how I got to know Miss Mitchell. It's kind of funny. Every year we do the 8th grade Model UN, and on that morning I go to Stop and Shop, and I'm getting all sorts of groceries, to feed the staff, the high schoolers that come there. And every year, it's like, it's so funny, but every year I run into Miss Mitchell there at like 6:30 in the morning, and she's getting a basket of stuff, and I don't know if she does it every day, because I only do this once a year. I'm not usually at Stop and Shop at 6:30 in the morning, but it's like clockwork. I like plan on seeing her, and now it's like a running joke that we have. Kind of shows me a little bit about her commitment. But the other thing I wanted to say about Miss Mitchell is she was on the committee of teachers with me and several other teachers for the restorative practices training. And we really bonded as a group, and she just really impressed me. She was just such a positive and insightful presence in that committee. I can't speak to, I was never in her classroom as a student, but in that committee, I was really impressed with her, and I really, really appreciated everything that she brought to the committee. And so I guess my heart goes out to her because, I know she's got like 16 years in, and and I haven't heard negative things about her. I have a positive experience with her, and just to kind of see, I know it's a very difficult position to be in, and I don't envy you at all, but it's also, I don't envy her, and it's hard for me to see where she can go. If I were cut right now, who's going to hire me? So I just feel for her. So just on a human level, it's difficult. And I thought she was so gracious in the way that she handled,
Absolutely.
like in her speech that she gave, I thought it was very gracious, and so I'm concerned about her. One thought came to mind. In the prior district that I was at, they had a culinary program there, and they actually, I think, made money off of it. Like, they turned it into kind of the man who was running it was a chef. He was a former chef, and he was teaching the other students his students to be chefs. And he didn't have a lot of students, but they made these amazing dishes, and we all bought them. So and they were making money, and so. Anyway, I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of revamping the program to actually bring in revenue and to try to offset some of the costs or something like that. So,
I like that thinking, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, we are trying to come up with this therapeutic program that, would bring students in from other districts. I wonder if there's some way, the special education program, I wonder if there's some way that it could be melded with that somehow. I don't know.
Be at the lower grades.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Oh, wait. Is that right? It's not? Okay. It's just Bartle and Irving? Or Bartle? It's Bartle. Right, okay. My apologies.
I also like that idea. I'd like to talk about that more another time.
Yeah.
Good evening. Keith Presti, President of the HPEA. I just wanted to give the board a bit of an update since last week when I spoke about some of the concerns from middle and high school staff about some of the discipline issues. I met with Scott and Darcy last Wednesday, and we did have a good conversation about that, where I did share a lot of the concerns that were brought to us. Some of those are the feelings of being unsupported, perceived lack of consequences, and the concern over the proper implementation of restorative practices. Darcy asked me to go back to the staff and see if we could identify clusters of behaviors. So I would just like to say that we did that. The staffs met today, and we're meeting again, Darcy, Scott, and I, on Wednesday, and I'll be presenting that information to you so we can continue the conversation. And I also met with the Bartle staff today, and there's been a lot of discussion lately about the social emotional learning program that we did have, and that kind of went away and is kind of coming back. But I would just like to make a few points about that, and also how it relates to Responsive Classroom, which is the program that we say we're doing at Bartle. But just to give you some numbers, the Social Emotional Learning Lab, which is what we call a Tier 2, is right now servicing about 47 students. I think we have somewhere around 500 in the building. So the SEL practices that we used to have, we would call a Tier 1, so that's all of the preventative, and that would be direct instruction on different skills, the SEL skills, and infusing that into the classroom and how people teach and how they interact with their students. We had a presentation today, and it was kind of nostalgic, where they were talking about best and listening position, and you know, all of the 525 and the keep calm, and you know, that used to be we were just that was just ingrained in us when we started. I mean, every beginning there would be a committee. They would meet over the summer. They would discuss it. What are we going to work on at the beginning of the year? Everybody was presented with the same materials. Everybody had the same posters in their classroom. Everybody had the same worksheets, the hassle logs, the fig test bin. You know, everyone developed a keep calm area. You know, the skills were actually taught through direct instruction, especially in the health program. So we, you know, and we used to be a beacon for SEL. And it's not anybody who's here right now, but it went away.
Vicky Podobicki went away, and it went away.
Well,
was my perception from
and a former superintendent who did not necessarily care or agree with that.
A bunch of things got
dwindled
broken.
And it went away. And when Vicky left, that was it. So I do think bringing back the lab is great. I do think we have to spend the majority of our time discussing Tier 1 direct instruction, and you know, responsive classroom is great, and it is an SEL program. So but there's only 4 teachers in this building that have been trained in responsive classroom, the real training, which is like a 4-day training. So I think that's something we have to look at. If we're going to use responsive classroom as our Tier 1, then everybody needs to be trained in it. We all need to be speaking the same language again. We all have to have the same resources again. And you know, and then the lab and some of the other things are, you know, where a student who might not be getting it at that Tier 1 level can be referred for extra, you know, support in that. And my bigger point is that problems with behavior and decision making and all those things didn't just start at the middle and high school. They start here and at Irving, and so we have to really look all the way down and really beef up our program here. And I do know that, you know, there's a lot of teachers at Irving that love responsive classroom as well, but I think there's plenty of opportunities that we can, we have lots of PLCs, we have building level PDs, we bring in outside consultants all the time for other things. Every PLC, every building level professional development should be focused on this. You know, I know there's a lot of other things that, you know, we have to attend to as well, but if we're really going to be serious and say, we're going to be responsive in the lower grades and we're going to be restorative in the upper grades, then I think we really have to step up our game, and I'm happy to continue to talk about in ways that we can do that. But I think, you know, sometimes the frustration from the staff comes from, we can't just say it, we have to do it. So, and you know, and people are more than willing to do it. People are like, I still have that stuff in some way or some other, you know what I mean? Like,
when that was so strong at Bartle, I don't remember, was that same language and the same philosophy at Irving as well?
No.
Yes. From a former Irving teacher, yes. Yeah.
All right then. Yeah. No, and you know, you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
I remember, like, I carried 525 with me and used it with my littles, you know, from what I had learned with my stepkids, because that came home even.
Right.
So, I mean, you're right. It was absolutely just this inherent, integral part of being a Bartle student.
It's just what we did.
Right, exactly. It was
who
what
we
you
were,
did,
really.
and it came
It was
home with the
identity.
kids. Like, the kids actually even brought it home and used it at home. So I couldn't agree with you more that on that Tier 1 is where we want to be reaching all of our students. So.
And we happen to have a committee that started 2 months ago called the Social Emotional Learning Community, made up of guidance counselors throughout the school district and our support staff like Juliana, who are specifically looking at that, going back to that Tier 1 model, because, and frankly, you know what, it wasn't so much me, Tracy Maiden, Anthony Benjamin, as it was 2 of Maurice Eliza's interns who helped redirect us. Remember, this program came out of Maurice Elias's lab way back when, thanks to Vicky Potapecki. So Maurice assigned 2 interns just to help get us back to that place. Remember, this is the first year we fully implemented the lab again. We started in the last half of second year, so it's a rebuilding effort. But Keith, you're totally right on, and it's definitely a work in progress.
Can I?
Sorry.
I would just like to point out again, too, that when we're moving away from out-of-school suspensions, that this is where we really need to be focusing, because if we beef up in-school suspension, which I think we should call it something else, but if we beef up in-school suspension and what a child will do during the day when they're in school suspended, that's another golden opportunity to work with. If a student ends up in school suspension, they clearly need to do some work on their social emotional learning. So that's where we should be focusing some of our attention as well. And instead of, just having them sitting in a room all day, listen, I don't really know what happens in in-school suspension, but sitting in a room, sitting at home, just working on some worksheet that, you have to give work when they're in school suspension, that would be the time they should be working on these skills as well.
We're on the same page.
Yes.
Could not agree
Thank you,
more.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just quickly wanted to say, my memory as a parent, and now I have a senior and a sophomore and an 8th grader, is that the Irving experience wasn't as consistent with their SEL. It was there. It was clearly there. But I remember, Bartle being the place where it was on a daily basis. The kids would come home with 525 and all that stuff. Like my husband, when I get upset, will say, Michelle, 525. Like that's the kind of thing it's, in my house too. But so in the middle school, that was then no longer a thing.
A lot of it has to...
No, I just wanted to say that from my memory, I don't remember it being as distinct in Irving as it was in Bartle. Bartle was absolutely every single year, every single classroom.
I think a lot of
It's
it
like
has
you
to
never
do
left.
Let me say one thing, Keith.
Presti, no.
I think a lot of it has to do with the principal. Kelly Freeborn was wholly committed to responsive classroom. I mean, I think you knew that. She was like a specialist in that area. She was even serving as a consultant. It's incumbent upon the principal ultimately to shape the culture of the school building. And if responsive classroom is going to be built in this building, we need to make it a systemic effort. I totally agree that it's not happening the way it should. Responsive classroom in particular.
And just listening to Michelle and what other people said, using it yourself, your kids are bringing it home. I mean, that's another wonderful opportunity to include the parents in all of this and working with their children and also themselves, like you're saying, all of those skills are something we all need to be able to do anyway. And sometimes it's a good reminder of how maybe we can handle situations for ourselves. Yeah. So what an opportunity to bring the parents in as well and the community and the students and all work on this together as a community.
Yep.
Yeah,
Bring it on.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Any other public comment? No? Okay, so we're going to move on to our board action items. Michelle, would you like to move the curriculum and instruction items, please?
Sure. Sorry about that. I would like to move items 1 through 4.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I just wanted to point out that, Mark, you and Keith have touched base on whatever negotiations issues there are related to us approving the English 11 with honors
We've scheduled
option.
a meeting, in fact, today.
Okay.
I don't know if we all got back, but I think we may have a date for early April.
Okay, so we're all good moving forward?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. All right, sorry, any other discussion? Nope. Linda, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Cimaresti?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Yes.
Okay, Mark, could you please move the finance and facilities items for us, please?
Yes, I believe that we're going to table till next month the Young Audience Arts for Learning.
Correct.
So I'll move items 1 through 26 with the exception of that sub-item on number 10.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Nope. All right, seeing none, Linda, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan? Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Okay, personnel and communication. Ann, could you please move those items?
Yes, I'd like to move items 1 through 25, including the amendments that I read into number 25.
Fabulous. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
If I can make one correction?
Yep.
On item number 23, the dates should read September 3rd, 2019 to April 30th, 2020.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Good catch.
Oops.
Okay, is there a second? Did we already do that?
I second.
Oh, sorry. All right, any other discussion other than our correction? Nope. Okay, seeing none, Linda, could we have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes?
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Okay, and finally, Mark, could you move those, our one policy item, please?
Yeah, I'd like to move item 1.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Nope. Linda, do we have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes?
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Okay, so that brings us to our liaison reports. I noticed that there was an agenda in the folder for the Municipal Drug and Alcohol Alliance, albeit not terribly illuminating, but
There's also one for library.
okay. Yes, I saw both of those in there. Mr. Krieger, anything from any of your various?
No, I have nothing.
Okay. I did notice, I just happened to notice on Facebook that there seems to be a volunteer meeting for HPTV folks coming up, although I don't remember what the date of that was. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think they're trying to
Get some more volunteers.
I know.
Gets more fresh blood in there.
Yeah,
It's
been,
a tough.
There's been one very, very busy person for a
Yes,
lot
there's
of years.
one remarkably dedicated. Thank you, Gary Leslie. Anyone watching us at home on TV, thank Gary Leslie, because if it were not for Gary Leslie, you would not be watching us on TV.
True.
And he needs some help, so please help Gary Leslie.
Hashtag.
Hashtag. We're going to start our own hashtag, our own social media hashtag for Gary Leslie. Rob, Magaziner,
Yes.
anything from the Ed Foundation,
So
other
the
than
Ed
all
Found-
the wonderful things that we just approved this evening?
Yeah, I mean, that's, and I think there actually are even a couple of additional ones that they're considering right now. I don't know if those have found their way in, but
2 emails, I think, came through today.
yeah.
So they'll be on the next
be on the
agenda.
next one.
Wonderful.
So the big thing, I think, right around this time of year is the spring fundraiser. So that is going to be May 11th. That's at the Center School Gym. It's going to be a casino night, which
I love
has
those.
been done before, but
Those are
I think it's
oh,
very
watch
popular.
out, Mr. Krieger's there. Wait, there isn't going to
Very
be any
popular,
money left
yes.
over once Mark's done.
So, all things gambling, that's what they're talking about, and they will, it'll be a good night, I'm sure. There'll be food, and I believe there is also beverage.
Wait, May 11th? Oh, yeah, that's... Oh.
May 11th. Yeah, I have a conflict, but...
I have a conflict too, now I'm sad.
Right. Anyway, folks should be looking in their mail for the invites and, on social media, et cetera, so.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Good night, Avery.
Good night, Avery.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Ann, anything from the Commission for Universal Access?
No, apparently the meetings are on Mondays. I just learned the head of the commission has indicated that hopefully come June or July, they are going to reschedule meetings so that board members are able to attend. And I have not yet received any agendas for those meetings, but hopefully soon.
Okie dokie. As Scott mentioned, there's an agenda in the folder for the last public library meeting. And I don't have anything for shared services. Once again, the town commission that never meets. Ruth, still no CPAC.
No.
I'm wondering if until like CPAC reemerges or comes back to life, would you be interested in maybe attending PTO meetings?
Sure.
Maybe that would be, at least there'd be something there.
Yeah.
Yeah, would that be, all right, so maybe you and I should talk about that. Because I was excited that, when we were planning our budget meetings, the last couple years, we've tried to have PTO meetings and we try to have our own, host our own meeting, with the PTO, and then nobody comes and it's kind of sad. So this time, Scott reached out to, the PTOs, I think just kind of like in general to find out, if there was already a meeting scheduled that we could just crash, so that there would automatically be people there, because the whole point is, we want to talk to people. We don't want to just talk to an empty room. We do that here most of the time. But it would be nice to have a little bit more interaction with the PTOs, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a good idea.
Awesome, thanks. I have one every once in a while. Monique, do you have anything for us from POSOC?
I don't. There was a meeting early in February, and I think what happened was I was absent at the board meeting where I would have discussed that meeting, and unfortunately I don't have those notes handy. But one of the highlights from that meeting is that POSOC is planning or thinking about, I think they are going to do it, commemorating the anniversary of desegregation by putting together a forum. And they want to make it an intergenerational forum where it'll be like having students now that attend schools have conversations with former Highland Park students who were around at the time of desegregation, and comparing then and now. And I thought that was really a cool idea. So they're looking to just kind of do some research and get that together. They want to have artifacts out in the room, so looking at the historical commission artifacts that they have and bringing that to the table as well. And I believe the target is to have that in the early fall. So that's exciting. And then the other piece, and I wish I had the date on me, I'll have to broadcast that in the next meeting. They are going to coordinate with the Teen Center for another diversity dinner.
Awesome.
Potluck dinner. So I will have more information on that at the next meeting.
Great, thank you. Anne, anything from the Human Relations Commission?
Yes, the commission met, March 20th. There's nothing specifically school related, but there are a couple of interesting presentations coming up on April 8th. If anybody who's interested should go to if you go to Facebook and search up Highland Park Borough Human Relations Commission, you'll see the Facebook page with events. But there's a presentation on April 8th at 7 p.m. at Borough Hall. It is, excuse me, sorry. It's called Lynching Through the Eyes of Artists. It's a presentation by Donald Beetham, who is a commission member. It's just what it sounds about. It's about lynching as it was memorialized by artists. It's not necessarily appropriate for younger children, but parents can decide that on their own. Let's see. Unfortunately, I think we have since missed the other two presentations. But April 8th at 7 p.m. is the Lynching Through the Eyes of Artists. And they're planning, I think it's tentative at this point, a Juneteenth cookout on June 19th, if I have that date correct. And I'll present more information about that when I have it.
Okay.
That'd be for the whole community to come and maybe do some different cultural performances and things.
All right, thank you. Michelle, do you have anything from the Board of Health?
Yes. So the Board of Health met in the 14th, and a couple different things. There's a resolution that the council is putting forward to our state legislature that would remove the religious exemptions for vaccinations, so that more children, hopefully, would be vaccinated. So we had a discussion about that, and I had just happened to listen to a really interesting podcast about measles, which was eradicated pretty much in 2013, but has since come back, and it's been in pockets where children are not vaccinated, mainly due to religious exemptions. So the Board of Health had to give their permission, or support or not to this resolution, and they did support it. Everyone there did support it. Also, they talked about the Sustainable HP Earth Day coming up, and the focus of Earth Day this year is air quality. Being that we have a town that has plenty of people driving and plenty of people walking, air quality is an issue that all of us are concerned about, and idling came up. And I remember we used to get reminders from the kids in the schools about like idling beyond 3 minutes was against the law, and so they talked about ticketing. And it was good to remind everyone of that. And so any ideas that anyone has about air quality that we could be discussing, they would be happy to hear about ideas for Earth Day. Also, they mentioned that there are drop boxes available for people that have prescriptions that are outdated or medication that needs to be disposed of.
Is there one in town?
That's great.
There are actually 2.
Really?
Yes.
I drove all the way up Riders
I
Lane because
know.
I didn't know there was one in town.
I know.
For
So
reals?
apparently, and just so happens I went to pick up my prescription at Rite Aid, and a little insert was in there with all the paperwork.
Who could go through all that?
Right? I just
You're a
tossed
saint
it,
if you
but-
went through all that.
Well, I did. So Saint Michelle saw that there was a slip of paper in there about Dropbox at Rite Aid and Safe Drugs. Stop it. No questions asked. You just drop it. Yeah.
Does this include?
Where is it?
Does this include needles?
I don't believe it
The one I
includes
went
equipment.
to, all the way up Riders Lane, no, it's not needles, it's just prescriptions.
But they can have them. When I was attending those meetings, they were discussing needles as well.
Okay.
You don't know
That
if they...
didn't come up. We didn't talk
Okay.
about medical equipment of any kind. It was purely prescription drugs.
Purely prescription.
Yes. So
That's great. That's something all parents should know.
all
really,
parents
right?
should know that. That's
Yeah, it's a great way to get that stuff out of your house. That's
Yep.
what I was looking to do. Like,
Yep.
there was stuff in my house, I needed to get rid of it, where do you put it? And when I looked it up, nothing in Highland Park came up.
right,
So-
and that's what the Board of Health was discussing, how to get the word out
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that. So Rite Aid was on the ball because I literally picked up my prescription a couple days ago and it was in there already. The little
Nice.
insert. Yeah, so that's good to know. And clean out your medicine cabinets. It's spring cleaning time. Also, they talked about climate change and outreach, wellness, and mental health. And those things took no time at all because it felt like such a massive discussion, but it was all lumped into the concept of Earth Day. So they really are trying very hard to come up with lots of great ideas about getting the word out through Earth Day, through that one activity. One more thing they talked about was fluoridation of our water. And currently we are not fluoridated, but we will be.
Really?
That is the plan. And so they
Interesting.
are right now looking, I think what they're doing is looking at different providers. But as far as the decision to go ahead with that, I think that that is decided.
Interesting.
Yes. So
All right.
that is everything that I have from the Board of Health.
Well, that's pretty juicy.
It's not bad, right?
Nice work.
Good job.
Thank you for that. We don't have Rob here for Green Team. I think Mark has already established that he has nothing from Cable TV Advisory. I have nothing for delegate to New Jersey School Boards. Next delegate assembly is in May, so for the next meeting I'll find out. I think we've probably missed any deadlines or whatever to submit anything, so. But I don't know that we have anything pressing right now anyway. And Rob's not here for Middlesex County School Boards, although I usually pay attention to those emails and I haven't seen anything terribly interesting come across. Oh, but which does remind me, one thing you and I talked about in terms of the budget, and this isn't a massive line item, but the two of us, I think, discussed it when we were at workshop in October. Maybe all four of us did. Remember, can't remember who I was with when we talked to somebody, you were definitely there, Rob, when we talked to somebody from the National School Boards Association.
I was there.
Right, and then we learned that like Highland Park is one of like very few districts in the state that is part of, a member of the National School Boards Association, and we all kind of went like, oh, well, that's interesting. Do we pay for that? Because like, as far as I can tell, all we get for that is a bunch of emails that I don't necessarily need, and I think we all do our part locally and on the state level, and I don't know that being a part of the National School Boards Association gets us much. So I think we were all kind of in agreement, like there's a few $1,000s we can save.
Absolutely.
So if that hasn't come out of the budget, we'll take that out of the budget and.
Good.
I read those maybe monthly.
Yeah.
One a month, maybe, if it's interesting.
The one time we were part, New Jersey was
Sorry.
part of the headline, it was wrong. And I had to go back and forth with the woman who sends the emails and say, that was wrong. The way you framed that was totally wrong. Right. And then I found out that it's just a like a service. They farm that out to somebody else. So I'm like, we're good. We don't need those emails.
It's pulling news
and
that you can get elsewhere.
And,
It's not.
As passionate as I am about these issues, I'm not about to get involved with the National School Boards Association. So I think we're good.
Yeah, she was a lovely woman.
Yeah, a few $1,000s we can save for something else.
We shouldn't.
Yeah, no, we are. I was like stunned to realize that we're paying for that.
It
So.
does sound really outdated in the age of the internet.
Blame this.
Yeah.
Well, there's a podcast that's part of it also, I guess, but supposedly.
Again, I'm good.
Right.
So as we go forward, we'll make sure that. Oh, now my pen matches.
We're looking at it on this computer. Yes, it's like $2,700.
I'll take the $2,675.
Do we? All right. I mean, committed to it.
Put it in the kitty.
Yeah, I think we're all. Yeah. I think we're all okay with that. Oh, yes. Unless there's something you think from your perspective that it.
I don't know anything about it, so
Okay.
I would think first we would want to make sure that we're not losing something that we need.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
We've never used them for anything that I know of,
Well,
and
but-
all we get are the emails.
I don't really know.
Okay. And the interesting part when we talked to her at workshop was like, she was like, they were actively trying to recruit more boards because they don't have very many in New Jersey apparently. So I don't think we're getting some,
We should find out we're not using them, and then we should drop it.
Huh?
We should make sure we're not using some service, and then we should drop it.
Right, yeah. Okay. All right, I don't have anything for my president's report this evening. Anybody have anything for old business?
Actually, I wanted to tell everyone that this Tuesday, tomorrow, at noon, the TGNC Policy Committee is going to be meeting up just to revisit the policy and to see, if we have any updates that we'd like to make to the policy. Talking about that, I really feel very strongly that we should consider presenting again at the board's conference in October, because there was a tremendously upsetting lack of discussion on any issues having to do with gender. Yeah, it was just, there was nothing. And I actually got into a pretty constructive conversation. No, I know, right? It's a shock. No, it was a pretty constructive conversation with two gentlemen who they just kind of didn't understand the concept, and I was very happy to speak to them, in a very personal way, and it was a very collegial, friendly conversation. So I would love to do it again.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have anything for old business? No? New business? No? Sorry. Public comment? No. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.